The 1996 murder of 19-year-old Stacy Lee Stites shook the small central Texas towns of Giddings and Bastrop, where she lived and worked. Shocked friends, co-workers, and family members waited almost an entire year before a suspect was finally charged with her murder.
When I actually met her, it was like late October, early November of '95. I met her at it was like a Diamond Shamrock, a little pool hall. And I met her right there at the jukebox. You know, she was putting in quarters and I was looking over, and just small talk led into the little relationship.
This morning, 19-year-old Stacy Lee Stites was reported missing. She left her home in Giddings around 3:30 a.m. and never arrived at work.
There's a lot of rumors flying around Bastrop, but nothing has been confirmed yet. No hard facts.
Now, what I can tell you, we'll start at the beginning. Stacy Stites was supposed to be at work at HEB here in Bastrop at about 4 o'clock this morning.
Later in the afternoon, her body was found near a road. She had been strangled.
Reed's subsequent conviction and sentence of death should have helped the communities begin to recover from the tragic loss. Instead, almost 10 years after her murder, controversy continues to haunt the case, and the truth remains a mystery for many of those who were involved.
It took the jury 5.5 hours to reach a decision. The verdict still leaves some with questions, while others feel justice is served.
Stacy was murdered on April 23rd of 1996. According to her boyfriend, they went to bed that evening about 10 p.m. She normally got up and went to work somewhere around 3 a.m. At the HEB store in Bastrop. She did not arrive as she was scheduled to do. So this would be her usual route, going to work every morning. It's out in this area that Stacy's bodies were recovered. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Basically like right about up in here.
I think I just got home from work and my friend Libby called and asked if I had seen the news. And I told her no, that I just walked in through the door. And she told me, to sit down, that, she had something to tell me and that, it was serious. And so I went up to my room and I sat down, and she told me that they had found Stacy's body and that she had been murdered. I don't think that, it really hit me until that Stacy was gone, until her actual funeral. When we sat down and I finally decided that I was gonna go up there and see her, and that's when it really hit me that, she was gone. And then I saw her in her wedding dress, and that was kind of really disturbing to me.
What went through my mind when I found out was I really couldn't believe. I really couldn't believe that it had happened until I actually saw it on the news.
According to the autopsy and crime lab report, the DNA found on the victim was a small amount of Reed's sperm. They
ran DNA tests on just a multitude of individuals that were involved in this case. And based on that DNA report, because DNA was found at the scene of the victim, Rodney Reed became a prime suspect in the case and eventually became the only suspect.
The last night that I was with Stacy, it was late night Sunday, early morning Monday, 21st and 22nd of April. She came by, she picked me up. I was at the center by my mom's house, the little activity center by my mom's house. Picked me up, we went out and hung out up at the state park, messed around, and had sex. She dropped me off and went on her way to work. That was the last time I saw her. She took me down, came down off 71 and went downhill and went down Linden. We was going down Linden, and right there on Linden and Main, she made a left on Main. She dropped me off right there on the corner. That was the last time I saw her.
During the alleged affair with Reed, Stites became engaged to a Giddings, Texas police officer named Jimmy Fennell around New Year's 1996, and they soon began living together and planning their wedding.
I know that whenever she had told me that, you know, she had started dating Jimmy, and you know, that she was happy because she thought that she actually found somebody that she could spend the rest of her life with, and that things, you know, you have to work to make things work in the relationship. And at first it seemed like everything was coming together, and then there are a few times, I guess, after she had moved to Giddings, I've talked to her maybe once a week, then it went to like once every 2 weeks, and then it kind of got, you know, far-fetched. And I know multiple times that she was supposed to come down, or, you know, she wanted to go out, and he didn't want that. You know, she was supposed to be at home, you know, cooking supper, doing, you know, already kind of like the wife thing, that she shouldn't, why would she want to go out anymore? You know, so I think when their relationship started, we got more distant. Multiple times he would walk in and hang up the phone before even saying anything. I know one time, I don't know if it was during Jamboree, it was kind of like a big fair that they had. She wanted to come down to it, and he was like, there's no way in hell. The next day, tires are slashed in her truck.
Let me just say this, and I mean, you know, again, this is my personal opinion, but my personal opinion when I heard that she had been killed was that Fennell had done it immediately. And I know a number of people around here that felt the same way, because they'd either observed enough about his personality and that sort of thing. And when we heard that she had been having an affair with a black guy, it was like, well, that's why he did it, you know, because his ego wouldn't let him. I mean, that would be a tremendous affront to his ego, you know. His bride-to-be, you know, messing around with a black guy, you know. He couldn't handle it.
Reed claims that he and Stites began a secret sexual affair in November of 1995, almost 5 months before her death.
She told me about her and Fennell, and as far as him, he was angry because he did know. He knew, and she told me that if he actually found out, her words to me was that he would kill her, you know, and I didn't take it as serious, you know how some people say, oh, I'll kill you, you know, you're just playing around or something like that, you know. I didn't take that he would literally, you know what I mean?
Prior to arresting Reed, Bastrop police investigators considered Jimmy Fennell a primary suspect. They issued him 2 polygraph examinations. Police Officer Fennell twice showed deception when asked if he was involved in the murder. After a year of investigation, authorities charged Reed with the capital murder of Stacy Stites. Soon after, the state announced that it would seek the death penalty.
The court had made arrangements for my co-counsel and I to stay in Bastrop. We decided to stay in Austin and make that commute on a daily basis instead of staying in Bastrop.
Well, what's that?
I felt safer in Austin because you had a black accused and a white deceased, a black male accused and a white female deceased, and you had sex involved in it, and you had a white boyfriend who was involved in it.
If it had been just a normal citizen and she wasn't, you know, involved with a cop, you know what I mean, this probably never came about.
Now, this trial has been front-page news here in Bastrop ever since it began 2 weeks ago. And even long before the jurors were given this case, a lot of the townspeople we discovered have already formed their own conclusions.
Most of the town, I think, is generally convinced that the jury probably did what they needed to do. And his parents and the people who are close to them remain quite unconvinced.
Rodney, hang in there. We love you, boy. See you real soon.
Now, at the beginning of this trial, the defense said that they could prove that Rodney Reed and Stacey Stites were having a secret sexual affair that could perhaps account for the DNA evidence found in her body. But no witnesses ever testified directly that they knew about such an affair.
I know that they had a relationship, you know what I mean, point blank. I've seen them together, you know. They've been here at this house, you know, I've seen them here in this house, you know, together countless times. You know, they were boyfriend, girlfriend, she used to sneak and meet them, you know, and it was just that type of relationship, you know.
She's been to my home. I do know her. So I feel that I should have been a witness for my son. He did not call Stacey's name. He told me that he was dating a girl that was engaged to a cop. And I went off.
If we would have been called as a witness, then most definitely we could have showed a relationship. But the excuse that they gave me is just that I was not credible enough, that I may do more harm to his situation, or to make him, they were trying to make him into this good person that what I'm saying could have turned him into a bad person or something. They didn't want any negative influence on the case. That's what they kind of told me.
Basically, everybody in Bastrop knows about them too. You know, it was a secret, but not a secret, you know what I'm saying? They'd meet up on the north end, or they'd go riding around. And, you know, a couple times I rode with them. You know, all he did is, you know, smoke, you know, laugh, kid, whatever. Then they'll drop me off and go on about their business.
All I can say is that on everything that Rodney told me that happened, I was able to verify. So, as far as I'm concerned, Rodney was very truthful about what happened and how it happened.
Unable to afford a private attorney, Rodney Reed was appointed 2 public defense attorneys 2 months before his capital murder trial began.
So, did Rodney receive fair assistance of counsel? That's the $64,000 question. It doesn't appear that he received a particularly zealous defense. You have defense attorneys who, in their opening arguments to the jury, which is where you basically lay a roadmap for what you're going to present during your case, tells the jurors that there will be evidence of this affair between Reed and Stites, and then never delivers on it. Although she had evidence that she could have used, never delivers on it. As a jury, you kind of got to wonder about that. So that wasn't particularly effective.
May I say that with what they had, both
of the trial attorneys did the best they could with what they had. And they chose not to bring up the affair thinking that it would harm Rodney more than it would help. Now, that was their decision. I can't say that we agreed with them, but we worked for them.
He had no defense. His attorneys didn't work for him. So in my opinion, they worked for the state. No one could have made the mistakes that were made. No one. This was all pretty much prearranged.
One dilemma facing Reed's attorneys was the credibility of the testimony of Reed and his witnesses.
It wasn't until trial, I'm thinking, well, I'm not gonna bug them or nothing. Maybe they are doing the investigation. This is what I was thinking. But then when trial came, I asked myself, well, where are my witnesses at? And Calvin told me, he said, look, we don't need no witnesses. And I'm like, what? He said, we don't need no witnesses. He said, we got this case beat. He said, they don't have nothing on you. I said, you're not gonna call my witness? I said, what about my alibi? He told me, he said, if we call your alibi, they're gonna mention about those drugs. I said, wait a minute, drugs don't have nothing to do with this case. And the next thing you know, the bailiff was knocking on the door, telling us that the judge was ready. Went into the courtroom, and then not too long after that, they was bringing this lady in, Diane Griffin, whatever her name, talking about the drugs. And I'm like, well, I told Calvin, I said, you should have called my witnesses. He never did.
One of the decisions that the lawyer has to make is, will this witness work more for me than against me? And because Stacy's and Rodney's relationship was rather secretive, there weren't that many people who were willing to come and testify that, yes, we knew that they had a relationship. There weren't that many people who wanted to come and testify, we'll put it that way.
Reed's defense team claims that the lack of witnesses called on his behalf was a result, in part, of intimidating conditions in Bastrop at the time of the trial.
Whatever convicted Rodney had nothing to do with what went on in that courtroom. He was convicted long before he got into that courtroom.
There was one lady, and I don't want to go through with her name, but she was threatened when they found out that we'd subpoenaed her to come and testify. She was threatened with legal reprisal should she come and testify.
When I went out to her residence the very next morning, because this was sort of late in the evening, we had to get a subpoena issued, she was scared to death.
She was totally frightened and would not answer the door.
Well, she answered the door, and I was able to I almost lost my hand trying to get the subpoena served. But obviously they had told her that not to say anything.
Consequences.
So
who told her? Someone in authority.
One of her friends, and I don't recall who, heard Stacy told her that her boyfriend had threatened her with killing her if she didn't tell Rodney. Cut off that relationship. Now, unless I'm just coming up with stuff out of the air, because I got no reason to make any of this up. And unless my investigator was just, token on a good one or reading a novel, he had no reason to make it up. He told me that these people would be reluctant to come forward and would most probably have to be subpoenaed. And if they got on the stand, would lie and say it wasn't true. Now, I'm telling you what he told me. Afraid, didn't want to speak ill of the dead. These are the things I was being told.
As the defense and prosecutors prepared themselves for the upcoming trial, an important and still contested exchange occurred between two longtime associates.
I had a client tell me that she had seen Stacy Stites and her fiance the morning that Stacy had apparently disappeared outside of a convenience store bar by the name of the Old Frontier in Page. I have known Charles Pennick, who was the criminal district attorney until recently, and so I approached him and told him that I had a client who might have witnessed something that was pertinent to the Stacy Stites disappearance, murder, and that I would be glad to furnish that information to him. And his response to me was, I have all the evidence on that case that I want or need, and I don't want to hear any more about that case. And basically I left it at that. Even when she told me this story, that she didn't know that that would necessarily be inconsistent with what everybody said had happened. In other words, she did not know what the fiance's story was about. I mean, for all she knew, he could have said we were at Page and we were talking and whatever. I went back home. But I understand that that's not the story that he told or the statements that he gave.
When you look at the pictures of the crime scene, what is real evidence is that she was not assaulted at that scene where her body was found. It's quite evident from the pictures there that the body was not drugged, it was dropped. Secondly, in the pickup truck, when they found it, they found her vest that she wore at HEB with her name tag on it. But yet, at one point when the crime scene team were working with her body, they rolled her over. Her name tag was stuck between her knees. Now, that couldn't have got there by accident.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm obsessed with the fingernails. Do you mind? Okay, the fingernail thing really bothers me. And because have you seen the photos, right, of the crime scene photos where they have her hand up like this and it's a big picture just of her fingers. And they're ragged. I mean, I'm a nail biter, okay? But my nails don't even look that ragged. I mean, they look pretty ragged, but not that ragged. They're jagged edges. They're not filed, and they're so far down. I mean, they're like down to cut to the quick, you know?
Why would you cut the fingernails to keep you from getting evidence? Okay. Yet I'm gonna leave the sperm. No fingerprints, no hair, no footprints. The only footprints that was found was the footprint of their own officers walking around contaminating the crime scene.
What does Stacy have on her body that were never explained? Burns. Very significant burns that are never addressed. He simply states that the left side of the face and the left ear are covered with a post-mortem appearing almost third-degree burn. It says that, that on the lower medieval portion of each breast there's a post-mortem appearing almost third-degree burn similar to the one on the face. It says there is on the medieval aspect of the right knee and upper left leg, there is another post-mortem appearing second-degree burn measuring 4 inches in its greatest dimension. 5 burns. second, third-degree burns on her body, and there's not one mention of what could have caused it.
Some of the most crucial testimony came from Dr. Robert Bayardo, the medical examiner who performed Stacy Stites' autopsy. He concluded that her death was indeed associated with a sexual assault and that it happened around 3 a.m. on the morning of the 23rd.
I mean, you should always go back and check somebody. I mean, no, you know, he, for example, made this claim that she had been sodomized, and I don't think there was any proof that she was sodomized. He didn't find sperm. Then he suddenly decides while he's testifying that there was sperm near her anus. I don't know where that comes from. You know, that there was this, I guess it was a scratch near her anus or whatever, that it was then suddenly tearing because she'd been sodomized. I mean, that just didn't make any sense anyway.
We thought we had the crime scene tape, but apparently there's a lot of the tape that wasn't provided to us, that it shows where there could have been cross-contamination, because anal sex became a big issue with the jury, big issue. And but it shows where cross-contamination could have taken place during that forensic investigation, because of not changing gloves when touching other parts of the body at the time.
The key on your ligature is, if you look at the ligature in these pictures, it's the wrong color. If she had died from ligature strangulation, it should be a pink mark. Now, if the ligature had been found on her, there would have been a different story, because if, you know, her heart would have stopped beating, and then you would have started maybe seeing this. But this tells you she's dead. She'd been long dead when this ligature was placed on her neck. I confronted Bayardo about that in June. I said, when you look at the ligature, tell it's real post-mortem. I said, it's clear she died of suffocation. And Bayardo popped back at me. Oh, strangulation, suffocation too. I laughed. I said, not the same. It's not what we're talking about. I'm not talking about that type. We're talking about compression, suffocation. He says, well, Dave, you're right. He says, it's very difficult, as you know, to tell the difference between strangulation and suffocation. You know what he said then? So I just guessed. A man's on death row. He says he just guessed.
One of the lingering questions for Reed is why his defense did not retain their own medical expert to challenge any of the medical evidence.
I don't think there's a lawyer alive who looks back on a trial that they've conducted, whether it's been successful or not successful, and says that they couldn't learn something else from it. So yes, I most assuredly will do things different. And I have done things differently because of that trial.
You know, you're supposed to zealously defend your cases and put on evidence that, you know, will lessen the state's case. And she basically admitted that she didn't because there was reasonable doubt. I mean, that's just a cop-out. You know, they didn't get anybody to dispute the medical evidence. This is a medical case.
And then we have this, called a cigarette burn. It's not in the autopsy. And that's at the morgue. It's not at the crime scene. Nowhere does it show up on the film in the crime scene, which tells you it was done after her body was collected, as was the mark in the center of her forehead. How could she get that mark?
But as far as being premeditated, I don't think so. I think there were some afterthoughts that were quickly thought about at the time after the body was dumped there.
And maybe not alone. Maybe there was collaboration after the murder itself.
This is the Travis County ME's log-in, log-out sheet for Stacy Stites. It was brought in by Marcus, or whatever, the MJN Funeral Home. Bastrop? No name. This body's evidence. You don't have change of custody with this body. Everything on this body that could happen at the ME's office now is questionable. No chain of custody. Anybody could do anything with the body.
As a matter of fact, during the evidentiary hearing, they asked Texas Ranger Wardlow, who was the lead investigator, why he finally dropped Jimmy Fennell as a suspect was logistics.
And Aaron, what do we know about this case?
Dick, we are literally getting information in even as we stand here. In fact, I'm waiting for an officer that can come outside and hopefully join us before we finish up. Now, what I can tell you, we'll start at the beginning. Stacey Stites was supposed to be at work at HEB here in Bastrop at about 4 o'clock this morning. Her fiance thinks she left the house at 3:30, and she did leave in his truck. Now, her boss at HEB called her mother when she didn't get to work and let her know that she was worried about her. They called the boyfriend, in turn, the fiance rather, and he put out an all-points bulletin on his truck, and they did track that truck down about 5:30 this morning here in Bastrop at Bastrop High School.
According to the statements by Officer Fennell, they took a shower and she went to bed about 8 o'clock. He stayed up watching TV until about 9 p.m.
When she got off work and they went upstairs together, they got undressed, they took a shower together, they got out of the shower and they got partially dressed, crawled into bed. He gave her a back rub while they talked about the wedding. She fell asleep. He went into the living room, fell asleep watching TV, came back, got in bed. He didn't see her leave.
You realize this entire case is built on Fennell's version of events, which, I might add, according to his own story, he slept through. So he says she left at 3 o'clock. Well, did you wake up? No, I was sleeping, but she would have left at 3 o'clock.
Then later on, he gives a statement. He gives a statement to the police stating that she doesn't eat breakfast before she goes to work. Well, how does he know? He's already stated that he never hears her leave. He doesn't know what she does in the morning.
Later on, after the investigation became a homicide investigation, the police did come out and canvass the neighbors here. However, what appeared rather strange to me is that they never searched the apartment to see if anything untoward happened in the apartment there.
One of the cops said, well, we couldn't have gone to the apartment and searched the apartment because we didn't have enough probable cause. I thought, that is the strangest thing I've ever heard.
That's the last place they know she came from. Quite naturally, you're gonna go to the last place that anybody's seen her, she was all right, and start from there, and then go to the end, okay? They didn't do that.
Roughly about 5:30 on the morning of the 23rd, prior to Stacey's body being recovered, the pickup turned up, parked right in here. The only fingerprints recovered in the truck were those of Stacey and Jimmy Fennell. There was no physical evidence at all that shows that Rodney Reed was ever in that pickup truck.
Rodney was so brilliant. This man, I mean, is just so brilliant that he was able to wipe only his fingerprints off of...
That's what Lisa Taylor said.
Yeah, the prosecution said Rodney wiped his own fingerprints off of the truck.
There were fingerprints found on the truck, which was hers and Jimmy Fennell's.
But he
he wiped his off.
Only his.
How brilliant.
Upon discovery of the pickup truck, Bastrop police officer Ed Salmella was made the lead investigator in the case. 3 months later, he died as a result of a gunshot wound that was declared self-inflicted and ruled a suicide.
At the funeral, there were people that he had thrown in jail
that came in and said, you know, that was one officer, and these people had been in jail before, and he said that was one officer that actually treated them like a human being all the way through the process of locking the door in the jail. So, you know, and that kind of made the family feel good about it, that he wasn't just another cop out there trying to throw people away. He tried to help them.
Ed was a Bastrop police officer, and a lot of black folks, you know, had runs into him and stuff like that. But if you ask me, he was a good person. You know, he wasn't a bad person. You know, me and him, we don't have our knockout, drag-outs, but, you know, it was basically like, okay, you do what I said do, other than that, it's cool. You know, he'll try to keep from taking you to jail. He'll talk to you and keep you from taking you to jail. That's the kind of person Ed was.
Ed Samela is an investigator. He's a detective. Him and David Board are the two detectives for the Bastrop Police Department. Ed Samela is the one who was assigned to this case. This is Ed Samela's report. I walked around and unlocked the passenger side door using Jimmy's keys, and then I opened it without disturbing any evidence it might have been left by the suspect. After opening the passenger side door, I started looking for any evidence that the suspect/suspects might have left. On the center hump, I noticed what looked to be some type of white body fluid. It appeared this white substance was still wet. How long in the state's theory could she have been in the passenger's floorboard? Now, if Rodney had abducted her and killed her, she could have been in the passenger's floorboard. For how much time?
According to the prosecution's theory, Rodney Reed murdered Stacy Stites sometime between 3:30 a.m., when she normally left for work, and 5:30 a.m., when the pickup truck was discovered in the high school parking lot.
Either way, in that short amount of time, either if she was killed at some other location then driven to that thing, or whether she was forced to drive there, or whatever happened, which we likely will never know, that in that short amount of time, that all this sort of biological evidence could wind up on the floor in the form of some mucusy stuff, which you start to drain, you know? I mean, your body drains. It's a fact of life, you know? But would it have happened in that short amount of time?
Look at all the discharge, mucus discharge. Mucus discharge does not begin to develop in a body in 2 hours. That's why otherwise every crime scene you'd see the body with these fluids running everywhere. What's that on her tooth? It's a little tan, right? That's just, see, there's a little tan spot right above the tooth on the gum. When you see it in blow up, it looks like a little BB-sized piece, one of those pieces of caramel-coated popcorn. And they're all over the passenger's floorboard where all the mucus is. And what does that tell you? It tells you she was face down on that floorboard of the truck.
What happened to Jimmy Finnell's pickup truck following the murder is still unclear for some of those involved in the case.
They turned over the truck to the boyfriend. Now, it was found at the school, and Stacy's body was found quite a distance away from the school. That would tend to suggest to me that, one, either a struggle took place in the truck, 2, she might have been killed in the truck, 3, she might have been transported in the truck, 4, it would have contained fingerprints, latent, evidence of the crime, latent forensic.
So there you go. They take the truck, they go over to the DPS crime lab, they start to do processing, and then like 4 days later or something, maybe 5 max, 4 or 5 days later, they return the truck to Finnell.
When I requested the truck and the opportunity to look at the truck, they could not provide it. There was no statement made that the truck was with DPS. No statement made that it had ever been turned over to DPS. I was told that it was turned over to the boyfriend. Now, that's what I was told.
This is the signing of the selling of the truck to Gold Chevrolet in Giddings. This is the best copy the state could come up with. You can barely make out that it was done. Well, you can see it's clearly was signed by Jimmy Finnell Junior. He swore at court that his dad handled the transaction on the selling of the truck. Here it is, right here. On the title for $24.96.
That is the day after.
That's the day after Stacy was killed.
How do you justify that? Evidence that is key to establishing a defense of alibi, the existence of another culprit or perpetrator, is irrevocably destroyed. How much sense does that make? None. Absolutely none. And, you know, I'm aware this is being taped, so I'm going on record. None. And I believe the state knew about it. I believe the district attorney for Bastrop knew about it. I believe the sheriff's department knew about it. And I believe the Bastrop Police Department knew about it. And I do believe they covered that up for reasons I do not know, other than the fact that they did not want a fellow officer implicated.
The only forensic evidence that they had to put Rodney at the scene was old DNA, sperm. That was the only physical evidence. And in our opinion, it just wasn't enough to send a man to death row.
Well, all the jurors that we were able to talk to said it was the DNA.
It was the DNA that finally made up their
The
mind.
DNA made the case against Rodney. I mean, that's it. It wouldn't have mattered whatever other stuff we came up with or whatever. DNA was the big issue that convicted him.
The prosecutors are trying to disprove the defense's suggestion that Stites and Reeds were romantically involved. That's how they explain that Reed's DNA matched the DNA that was taken from Stites' body. But in an official statement that he made to the Bastrop police in April of last year, Reed said, quote, "I don't know Stacy Stites, never seen her."
One of the most crucial aspects of the prosecution's case was a statement Reed made to authorities after he was arrested on an unrelated cocaine charge.
At the time, like I said, I was charged with delivery of cocaine, and this is why I was in jail. And all of a sudden, while doing the interrogation, I'm thinking that I'm going to be interrogated about the drugs. I asked Officer Board, David Board, I asked him, I said, where's the drugs and where's the informant? And he said, we'll get to that. And then he reached down his side in his little briefcase and he showed me a picture of Stacy. And I'm like, how can they flip this from a drug charge? Now he showed me a picture of Stacy. I'm like, wait a minute, I don't know nothing about that. I don't know her, I don't know nothing, because I didn't want to be a part of this investigation. I didn't want to had nothing to do with it, That's the reason why I wasn't as forthcoming, with them.
Put yourself in Rodney's position and already the feeling that pervaded the area. What would you do? You wouldn't want to be put in that position, but that hurt us from the standpoint that it looks like he's lying right off the bat.
Which he was.
Which he was at the time.
Rodney had been accused of a long series of rapes. Most of them had never gone to trial.
What I could say about the allegations and accusations that they have prior charges against me with the women, well, I went to trial. I was acquitted. They wanted to give me a deal. I was not going to give a deal because I was innocent of that.
One of them that did go to trial, not here in Wichita Falls, Reed essentially told the same story to a jury. That is, Yeah, we were lovers, and so the rape allegation is bogus. And the jury acquitted him.
They had me a court date set. They kept postponing. They postponed that from 87 until 91. I didn't go to trial until 91, and that's unheard of. If a black man is accused of raping a white woman, you know, they're not gonna wait no 4 years to take him to trial. They waited 4 years, and then I eventually got acquitted. Lucy, that's something in its own, you know. My ex, the mother of my sons, I put it like the mother of my mom, to call her my wife, the mother of my sons. And she said what she said, but then she eventually went back and the charges were dropped and dismissed in that case, you know.
You know, everybody says, well, look at his past record with all these sexual assaults and all of this kind of thing. Well, number one, if you look carefully at them, okay, he had, for the most part, he had live-in relationships or ongoing relationships. Consensual with these people. Now, and for the most part, almost all of them, I believe, were dismissed.
So they were very effective witnesses for the prosecution in telling the jury, hey, look, this is a bad boy. He's a predator. You know, he'll sneak up on you in the night.
After 3 weeks of trial, the Bastrop jury took only 4 hours of deliberation to convict Reed of the murder of Stacy Stites. 2 weeks later, the same jury condemned Reed to death for the crime.
I knew that, you know, we had filed my writ in November of '99, and I knew the state was going to file theirs, and I wanted to know what the state was saying. I already knew their theory, but I wanted to know what these experts are saying, you know, and investigators and witnesses or whoever they have often, you know what I'm saying?
When Rodney finally got a copy of that writ on death row, he went through the exhibits and found a May 13th lab report issued by the DPS. Now, the May 13th was the second to the last day of the evidentiary phase of the trial. He had never seen it. The report was centered around DNA tests on some beer cans found in the vicinity of the girl's body. The results appeared to be a mixture of DNA on one of the beer cans to be that of the victim and 2 police officers. One officer was the partner of the boyfriend who was in Giddings and lived next door to him within eye shot. His name was David Hall. Second police officer was Ed Samella, who was the first officer in the investigation of the disappearance of Stacy the morning she was reported missing. 3 months after he conducted his initial investigation, he died of a gunshot wound. That was declared self-inflicted.
I knew something the whole time. I'm thinking in my mind when they convicted me and when I was over at Ellis, I knew about the police officers, you know, being suspects and all this stuff, you know, by the time the trial, you know, after the trial and all. And I was still trying to place where did those police officers come in? It wasn't until I got over here at this unit was when I saw that DNA lab report in the state's response to my writ.
The cans were bright and shiny. They were laying on top of everything. There were no leaves on them. They had not been sun-faded in any way. And secondly, as you can see, this road is a pretty dusty road. And if those beer cans had been there any length of time, there would have particularly the one that was crumpled, would have had dirt in the creases. There wasn't any dirt in the creases. Those were fresh beer cans.
That report never got to the defense lawyers. Okay. The prosecution insists that they certainly had it. They knew about it. They didn't think it was very important, but if they didn't get it to the defense, it wasn't because they didn't mean to.
Somebody should be able to recall some information that detrimental to the case, you know what I'm saying? Something that's incriminating two suspects, namely police officers, you know. And, I know that they just lied about that, you know, pointing the finger at each other to try to cover that, you know.
I've gotten, you know, these letters that came out in the paper on DNA, you know, testing a beer can and it having David Hall and Ed Somla's DNA on it. I know everybody's heard that. Number one is I want to know what two police officers are doing drinking out of the same beer can. That, you know, to me, that's just absurd. I feel, I'm not sure, but I feel that could have been placed on the scene for further if someone got out of line.
I remember there was a time where Stacy, she would come with marijuana and wanted me to trade it, you know, wanted to trade for cocaine, crack cocaine. And I was wondering where was she getting all this marijuana? And I remember her telling me, Edward. She said Edward. And I know Ed Samela by Ed. You know, when you mention Ed, you say his name Ed. Everyone know who you're talking about, Ed Samela, which he was over narcotics, you know, the narcotics division down in Bastrop. When she said Edward, I was thinking several other people that I know by that name, and it didn't dawn on me that it was him until it came back that he was one of the suspects.
12-year veteran Ed Salmela was fired from the Bastrop Police Department 2 days before his death. The reasons behind his firing and the events that led to his death remain questioned by those who were close to Officer Salmela.
I had to do the cleanup after my brother's alleged suicide. The couch was removed from my brother's apartment. They said it was too unsightly for us to see. I got a call from the laundromat where there's a young lady who folds clothes, washes them and folds them for you by the pound. Said that my brother dropped some clothes off down there. I went down to pick them up and said that he had arrived at the dry cleaners, or at that cleaners, it's about 7 o'clock, 6:30 to 7 o'clock. Dropped them off and said that he would be back in an hour to pick them up because he was going back to Louisiana to see a girl and do a little more gambling because he still had vacation time. And I guess at this time, he knew he'd already been fired, but he was getting paid out on vacation. So he was going to go back there and just kind of live it up a little bit. And approximately an hour later, he went to a pulse machine there at the bank and had made 3 transactions for $600, which is $200 per transaction. That money and those transaction slips were still sitting in his console of his truck. Approximately 30 minutes later, the man's dead.
From what I understand, the Texas Ranger, the same investigator that was investigating this case, Texas Ranger Warlow, Rocky Warlow, he was investigating Samela's death as well. And they said that they ruled his death as a suicide. But in the autopsy reports and everything, that there was no gunpowder residue on Ed Samela at all, on his hands or nothing like that. And there was the perfect muzzle imprint, the entrance wound at the top of the left side and the bottom of the right side of the head. And I just can't see there with them saying that he committed suicide and there not being any gunpowder residue. I find that hard to believe, you know. Gunpowder residue just don't up and leave, just doesn't walk away.
The investigation on my brother's death, I do not believe was handled correctly. The Bastrop Police Department came in, understand, and went to the scene and decided that it was one of their ex-police officers or police officers. Therefore, they backed out and called in the Texas Rangers. And by the lead investigator on that was a man by the name of Rocky Wardlow. Now, I don't know if anybody else knows, but Rocky Wardlow had been going through a divorce a few months earlier and was actually a roommate of my brother. He needed a place to stay. Therefore, I felt Rocky Wardlow should have stepped back as the lead investigator on that instead of going forward with it. I believe that was handled all incorrectly. My brother's being shot with the left hand is bogus. My brother couldn't do anything with his left hand. He shook too bad. my brother was right-handed. I mean, the evidence is laying there. I do not believe they investigated anything, or they would have found the laundry, the money slips. They you know, when an officer or so-called soon dismissed officer, I believe should have been investigated a lot more. I think they investigate a regular homicide more than what they would have done my brothers, because they came to a conclusion the minute they walked in the door. I believe my brother got into something and found out way too much, is my feeling on my brother's case. And he was actually sitting back trying to figure out how to go and resolve this, and ended up not being in this world anymore. I believe he had some information that was incriminating to maybe some other officers, maybe not in that county or in another county, that actually led to his death. Yes. Myself, I don't believe they have the correct person in prison over the Stacey Stipes murder. And I do believe that if they find out, or if it's found out that somebody else had killed Stacey Stipes, they'll find out in my mind who killed my brother.
In November of 2005, the U.S. Western District Court ordered a rehearing of several issues regarding Rodney Reed's conviction, including suppression of evidence during his trial. The hearing was scheduled for March 2006.
That's what the jury found, and that's, you know, if the appeals process finds something was not right in that process, then I hope they find it.
To meet somebody like that and then have her taken away without being able to say goodbye, especially in this situation when there's so many sides of everybody's story, you know, what's to believe, you know? All I know is that she's not gone, and she won't be gone until, you know, something's done about this.
I mean, that's unfortunate, but I believe that that they will affirm and that he'll die.
I believe every man has a conscience, and actually every man has a good part of that conscience. And sooner or later it will get the best of him, and someone will come forward. And it may not be another 20 years, but I do believe in time everything will come out.
As far as executions, I try my best to keep that out of my mind. I'm not looking in that direction, you know. I'm seeing my children. I want to, you know, be with my family. That's what I'm looking at.